Welcome to our next chess lesson. Today we will be talking about rooks and bishops. As you recall, last time we were discussing the power of the queen. The queen is a long-range piece who can move along ranks and files and along diagonals. Like the queen, the rooks and the bishops are also long-range pieces, but they divide her tasks, the bishops along the diagonals and the rooks along ranks and files. Rooks are very powerful pieces. Rooks rule the ranks and files. They can cross the board in a single bound. Rooks can move forwards, they can move backwards, they can move side to side, as many squares as are available. Rooks always move in a straight line. Rooks cannot jump pieces. So this rook cannot go like this. It must move around its own pawns. The rooks can move on dark squares and light squares. One moves straight or to the side. The rooks are worth 5 points. Now the bishops also move in a straight line, but they move along the diagonals. When you first start, you have one bishop on a dark square and one bishop on a light square. They move in a straight line, as many squares as are available, along the diagonal, like this. This bishop can move along this diagonal like this. Like the rooks and the queen, the bishops can move diagonally backwards. They can move diagonally forwards, but always in a straight line on their turn. Like the rooks, the bishops cannot jump over their own pieces. They cannot jump over other pieces. So if there's a pawn like this bishop could capture this pawn, and because pawns also capture diagonally, this pawn could capture. But this bishop could not leap over this pawn to capture this pawn, just like this rook could not leap over this pawn to capture this one. Now the reason that rooks are worth 5 points and bishops are only worth 3 points is because at the very end of a game, if you have a rook and a king against a king, this rook and king can checkmate the opponent's king. It would look like this. This king would block these 3 squares, and this rook could come down, checking the king. The king could not get out. He could not move here because he would be in check. He could not move here because he would be in check. He could not move here because he would be in check. And he could not move anywhere along the rank because this rook guards all of these squares. So that would be checkmate. Now at the end of the game, if you have a king and a bishop, white would not be able to win. This would be a tie game. This would be a draw. Because as long as this king stays on a dark square, this bishop cannot check him. And even if he goes to a light square, this bishop could check, but then he could just move to a dark square. And once he's on a dark square, because the bishop is confined to the light squares, this bishop could never check that king. This bishop can never capture anything on the dark squares. This can be confusing to young players. So what I tell them is that you have brother bishops. You have one bishop who rules the dark squares, one bishop who rules the light squares. Young players have trouble following the diagonal, so it's important when you're teaching them to play that they keep their piece close to the board so that they understand that if they're moving corner to corner to corner along a diagonal, the bishop will stay on its color. Similar with this one, the bishop moving corner to corner to corner will stay on its diagonal. Kids will often confuse rooks and bishops. They will wonder, do rooks move along the ranks and files or do bishops? They ask me, can this rook move like this? And what I tell them is to remember that rooks rule the ranks, bishops bop along the bias. And that helps them to remember that the bishops move on the diagonals and the rooks move along ranks and files. One of the games that you can play with your child to help them learn both the way the bishop and the rooks move And also the power to capture across the board is to set up what I call these pawn mazes, where your child will have white and they should capture with every move. Interestingly, many children, when they have a capture, will move their piece to almost capture. So you want to teach them to be aggressive and to capture with every move. It also teaches them to keep their bishops on the diagonal on the same color. So with each move, the bishop should capture. With each move, the bishop should capture. Bishop should capture. Now notice I have a pawn on the white square right here to fool them. They should not be able to capture. They need to keep their bishop along this diagonal, capturing with every move. And you can set the pawns up so that they can move. There's one pawn left that this bishop can never, ever capture. You can do this also with the rooks, setting up pawns for them to capture along the ranks and files. You can set up as many pieces as you want, make it fun for your child. So enjoy learning about the bishops and the rooks. Next week we'll talk about the tricky knights.